In a cold, pristine mansion, a grieving billionaire watches his infant twin sons retreat from the world. Their silence a constant, heartbreaking reminder of the wife he lost on the day they were born. Doctors are baffled, therapists are helpless, and a string of highly paid nannies have all failed. Then, a young woman with no fancy degrees arrives, armed only with a quiet understanding of the heart and a courageous willingness to break every single rule. I like to realize that our community covers all corners of the world. One quick question: from which corner of the planet are you watching me? Write your country below, and let's see how far we've come together. Barely 5 minutes had passed since the miracle, since the world had tilted on its axis, when a voice sliced through the crisp autumn air. A voice that turned the blood in Rose's veins to ice. What in the hell is going on here? Harrison Croft stood at the edge of their blanket, his face a mask of thunderous fury, tinged with something that looked unnervingly like panic. "Mr. Croft!" Rose shot to her feet, instinctively positioning herself between him and the twins. "I can explain." "You directly disobeyed my orders," Harrison said, his voice trembling with a tightly controlled rage. "You took my sons out of the house without permission. You put them in danger. You—" He stopped abruptly, his eyes locking onto Theo, who was actually standing on his own 2 feet, gripping Rose's leg for balance. Harrison's furious expression dissolved, replaced by a pale, slack-jawed shock. His voice was a choked whisper. "He's standing?" "Yes," Rose said quietly, her own voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her. "Both of them. They took their first steps about 10 minutes ago." Harrison Croft was paralyzed in the grand archway of his living room. His leather briefcase slipped from numb fingers, striking the Italian marble with a sharp crack that echoed the shattering of his reality. What he was seeing was impossible. His 18-month-old twin sons, Leo and Theo, who had never taken a single independent step, who had never spoken a single intelligible word, were walking. Actually, walking across the Persian rug on their own 2 feet. And they were talking. "Mama, Mama," Leo was saying, his tiny voice clear and filled with a joy that was utterly foreign in this house, as he toddled toward someone. "Up, up," Theo echoed, his little arms reaching upward. But it wasn't Harrison they were calling to. It wasn't their late mother, Sophia, who had died giving birth to them. It was Rose Camden, the 26-year-old black nanny Harrison had hired just 3 months ago. She was sitting on the floor, tears of pure joy streaming down her face, her arms open wide as the twins navigated their wobbly legs toward her, speaking their very first words. Harrison felt his knees threaten to buckle. The doctors had labeled the twins as delayed. They had hinted at potential developmental issues, suggesting that their mother's traumatic death during childbirth might have affected them in some profound, unseen way. Specialists from across the country had examined them, run batteries of tests, and prescribed a litany of therapies. Nothing had worked. The twins had remained silent and still, sitting wherever they were placed, their gazes vacant, as if they were perpetually waiting for something that would never come. Until now, until Rose. "How?" Harrison whispered, but his voice was swallowed by the sound of his son's laughter, a sound he had never, ever heard before. Rose looked up and saw Harrison standing there, a ghost in his own home. Her expression of radiant joy instantly shifted to something that looked like fear, or even guilt, as if she'd been caught in a transgression instead of presiding over a miracle. "Mr. Croft, I can explain." But before she could finish, Leo, emboldened by his new skill, stumbled and fell. Harrison lunged forward, a surge of parental panic overriding his shock, but Rose was faster. She caught the little boy in a fluid motion, pulling him gently into her arms. "You're okay, sweet boy," Rose murmured, her voice a soft balm. "You're so brave. You walked all by yourself." Leo looked up at Rose and smiled. A real, genuine smile that lit up his entire face and, for a moment, looked so much like Sophia's it stole Harrison's breath. Then he said the word again, the word that plunged a dagger of grief straight into Harrison's heart and in the very same instant began to stitch the wound closed. Mama. But to understand how we arrived at this moment, a moment of impossible breakthroughs and shattered certainties, we need to go back to where it all began. 6 months earlier, the Croft Mansion in Atherton, California was the kind of place people fantasized about. 35 rooms, a swimming pool that shimmered like a sapphire, tennis courts, and gardens so perfectly manicured they looked like a magazine cover. It was a $42 million estate filled with artwork and furniture that cost more than most people's homes. But it was also the saddest, quietest place you could possibly imagine, a monument to profound, echoing silence. Harrison, at 38, was the celebrated CEO of Croft Dynamics, a tech company specializing in AI-driven logistics worth billions. He had everything money could buy. Everything, that is, except the one thing that truly mattered. His wife, Sophia, had died 18 months ago during an emergency C-section. The doctors had saved the twins, but they couldn't save her. Harrison had been in a board meeting in Tokyo when he got the call. By the time his private jet touched down in California, Sophia was already gone. The twins, Leo and Theo, came home from the hospital without a mother. Harrison, hollowed out by grief, hired a rotating staff of nurses and nannies to care for them. He bought the best cribs, the most expensive educational toys, the finest organic cotton baby clothes. But he couldn't bear to hold them. To hold them was to feel the phantom weight of his wife in his arms, to see her smile in the curve of their own. It was an agony he couldn't endure. Their lives had been traded for hers. A silent, terrible transaction he relived every day. So Harrison did what he knew how to do. He worked. He poured himself into 18-hour days at the office, drowning his grief in video calls and quarterly reports. He provided everything his sons could possibly need, except the one thing they needed most: a parent who was present. The nannies came and went. 7 of them in the first year alone. Some quit because the suffocating sadness of the house was too much to bear. Others were fired because Harrison, in his desperate need for control, found fault with everything they did. They held the babies wrong. They fed them the wrong brands of organic puree. They didn't adhere to his meticulously detailed schedules with military precision. But the real reason they left was because the house felt haunted. Haunted by Sophia's vibrant absence and Harrison's crushing grief. And haunted, most chillingly, by the profound silence of 2 babies who never cried, never laughed, never made any sound at all. By the time the twins were 15 months old, Harrison was desperate. The doctors confirmed the boys were physically healthy but severely developmentally delayed. They weren't walking. They weren't talking. They barely made eye contact. Sometimes trauma affects children in ways we don't fully understand. Hunter Martinez, a renowned pediatrician, had explained gently. The circumstances of their birth, the absence of their mother, the lack of a consistent emotional connection, all of these factors can deeply impact development. "What do I do?" Harrison had asked, his voice a hollow echo of his former self. "You need someone who can provide what you can't right now," the doctor advised. "Someone who can give these children the emotional warmth and consistent loving presence they need to feel safe enough to grow." Little did Harrison know that person was about to walk into his life. Rose Camden was 26 years old when she applied for the position at the Croft Mansion. She had been working with children since she was 18, first as a daycare assistant, then as a nanny for wealthy families. But Rose was not the kind of polished, credential-heavy caregiver the agency typically dispatched to the homes of Silicon Valley royalty. She carried a different kind of wisdom, one learned not in lecture halls but on the front porch of her grandmother's house in Atlanta, where she was raised after her own mother died when she was young. Her grandmother had taught her that what children needed most wasn't expensive toys or rigid schedules. It was love, pure and simple. Rose had studied early childhood development at a community college while working full-time. She couldn't afford a 4-year degree, but she had devoured every book she could find on child psychology, attachment theory, and developmental milestones. More importantly, she possessed a rare, natural gift for connecting with children who were struggling, the ones the world had deemed difficult. When the agency called about the Croft position, they warned her. "This is a difficult placement, Rose. The father is demanding and distant. The twins have significant developmental delays. 7 nannies have already quit or been fired. Are you sure you want to try?" "Tell me about the children," Rose said, her voice calm. 18-month-old twin boys. They don't walk, don't talk, barely interact. The doctors say there's nothing physically wrong, but something is clearly not right. Rose felt a familiar ache in her heart. She had seen this before. Children who shut down emotionally when they didn't have a secure attachment figure. It wasn't about intelligence or physical ability. It was about feeling safe enough to let the world in. "I'll take the interview," Rose said with quiet resolve. The interview with Harrison Croft lasted exactly 12 minutes. He sat behind a massive, imposing desk in his home office, barely glancing up as she walked in. In those first few moments, Rose noticed everything about him. The expensive suit that hung just a little too loosely, as if he'd lost weight, the dark, bruised circles under his eyes, the wedding ring he still wore on his left hand, and the framed photo of a beautiful laughing woman, his late wife, undoubtedly, turned face down on his desk, as if the sight of her was too painful to bear. "The twins require strict schedules," Harrison said mechanically, his eyes fixed on a point somewhere over her shoulder. "Feeding times, nap times, therapy appointments. Everything is written down in these binders. You will follow them exactly. You will keep detailed logs of everything the twins do each day. You will not deviate from the plan." Rose looked at the stack of binders on the corner of his desk. There were 5 of them, each as thick as a phone book, filled with spreadsheets, charts, and cold clinical instructions. "Mr. Croft," Rose said gently, "can I ask you something?" Harrison looked up, clearly taken aback at being questioned. His eyes met Rose's for the first time, and she saw the profound, bottomless depth of his pain. "What? When was the last time you held your sons?" The question struck Harrison like a physical blow. The blood drained from his face. "That's not relevant to—" "When was the last time you sat on the floor and played with them?" Rose pressed on, her voice soft but unwavering. "When was the last time you sang to them or read them a story?" Harrison stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the hardwood floor. "If you're not interested in following my instructions—" "I'm very interested in helping your sons," Rose interrupted quietly, her calm a stark contrast to his agitation. "But children aren't machines that run on schedules. They're little people who need connection and warmth, and from what I'm hearing, that's what your boys have been missing." Harrison stared at Rose for a long, silent moment. He should have been furious. He should have ended the interview on the spot and called the agency to complain. But something in Rose's calm, compassionate voice and the way she looked at him without a trace of judgment made him pause. "Can you help them?" Harrison asked, his voice cracking, the question a raw plea. "Can you make them normal?" "Mr. Croft, your sons are already normal," Rose replied. "They're just hurting. And yes, I believe I can help them heal." Harrison hired her on the spot. What happened next would challenge everything he thought he knew about his sons, about love, and about what it truly means to be a parent. Rose arrived at the Croft mansion on a Monday morning with 2 worn suitcases, her grandmother's old book of lullabies, and a heart full of quiet determination. Mrs. Peters, the head housekeeper, showed Rose to her room, a beautiful suite with its own bathroom and sitting area. Then she led Rose to the nursery where the twins spent most of their time. The nursery was like a pristine, lifeless museum exhibit. Custom furniture, expensive mobiles hanging motionless from the ceiling, shelves overflowing with educational toys still in their original packaging. Everything was perfectly clean, perfectly organized, and perfectly silent. And in the center of the room, sitting on a plush playmat, were Leo and Theo. They were beautiful boys with dark, curly hair and serious brown eyes. They sat exactly where they had been placed, not moving, not playing, just staring into the middle distance. Rose felt her heart break all over again. "This is their schedule," Mrs. Peters said, handing Rose one of the thick binders. "Feeding at 9 o'clock a.m., 12 o'clock p.m., and 5 o'clock p.m. Nap from 1 o'clock to 3 o'clock p.m. Physical therapy at 4 p.m., speech therapy at 6 p.m., bath at 7 o'clock p.m., bed at 8 o'clock p.m. Mr. Croft reviews the daily logs every evening, so make sure you're detailed." Rose looked at the rigid schedule, then at the listless twins, then back at the schedule. "Mrs. Peters, can I ask you something? Does anyone ever just play with them?" Mrs. Peters looked uncomfortable. "Play isn't on the schedule, Ms. Camden. Mr. Croft believes structure is what the twins need." After Mrs. Peters left, Rose stood in the perfect silent nursery and made a decision. She closed the binder and set it aside on a high shelf. Then she sat down on the floor, right next to the twins. "Hi, Leo." "Hi, Theo," Rose said softly. "My name is Rose, and I'm going to be taking care of you. But I'm not like the other people who've been here. I'm not going to follow schedules or charts. I'm just going to love you." The twins didn't respond. They didn't even look at her. Rose didn't expect them to. She knew that trust had to be earned, not demanded. So, Rose just sat with them. She didn't try to make them do anything. She didn't force activities or therapies upon them. She just stayed close, humming softly, a constant, gentle presence, letting them grow accustomed to her. After an hour of just sitting together in companionable silence, Rose reached out slowly and gently laid her hand over Leo's. He didn't pull away, but he didn't respond either. "That's okay, sweet boy," Rose murmured. "We have all the time in the world." By the end of the first week, Rose had completely abandoned Harrison's schedules. She fed the twins when they showed signs of hunger, put them down for naps when they seemed tired, and spent the rest of the time simply being present with them. She talked to them constantly, narrating her day even though they never talked back. She sang them the old, soulful songs her grandmother had taught her. She held them, rocked them, stroked their hair, and slowly, very slowly, something began to shift in the quiet, sad house. Rose was documenting everything, but not in the way Harrison had instructed. While Harrison's official log, which she filled out dutifully each night, showed that Rose was following his schedules to the letter, she was keeping her own secret notebook, a simple, spiral-bound journal where she recorded what really mattered. Day 3, Leo made eye contact for 2 full seconds today while I was singing, the first time he's really looked at anyone. Day 5, Theo leaned his head against my shoulder when I held him. Didn't pull away like he used to. Day 8, both twins smiled when I blew bubbles. Real, genuine smiles. The first positive emotion I've ever seen from them. Day 12, Leo reached for a toy today, the first independent movement towards something he wanted. Rose was seeing progress, but she knew Harrison wouldn't understand it. He wanted measurable, concrete milestones, first steps, first words, things he could check off a list. What Rose was documenting was more subtle, but infinitely more important. The twins were learning to trust again. They were learning that the world could be a safe and warm and predictable place. They were beginning to heal from a trauma Harrison didn't even realize they had experienced. By the end of the first month, the changes were undeniable, even to an outsider. The twins made eye contact regularly. They would reach for Rose when she entered the room. They even laughed at her silly faces and songs, but they still weren't walking, still weren't talking. Harrison noticed the changes, but he couldn't grasp their significance. "Ms. Camden, the twins seem more responsive," he said one evening, his tone formal, "but they still aren't hitting their developmental milestones. The speech therapist says they should be saying words by now." "Mr. Croft, can I show you something?" Rose asked. She opened her secret notebook and showed him page after page of her detailed observations. The twins' first real smiles, their first intentional reach for a toy. The day Leo let Rose feed him without turning his head away. The day Theo fell asleep in her arms instead of staying rigidly, watchfully awake. These are milestones too, Rose said gently. Emotional milestones. Your sons are learning to feel safe. That has to come before they can possibly focus on walking and talking. Harrison stared at the notebook, seeing his son's slow, painstaking progress in a way he never had before. He felt something crack open deep in his chest. Grief, guilt, and something else he couldn't name. Hope. How long? Harrison asked quietly, his voice rough with emotion. How long until they're normal? They're already perfect, Mr. Croft. They just need time. And they need you. The last 3 words hung in the air between them. Harrison looked away, unable to face that particular truth just yet. But neither of them knew that in exactly 17 days, everything would change in a way that would shock them both. It happened on a sunny Tuesday afternoon, 2 months after Rose had started working for the Croft family. Rose had been feeling increasingly frustrated with the twins' confinement. They spent all their time inside the sterile, controlled environment of the mansion, never experiencing the real world outside its gates. Mrs. Peters, Rose said that morning, I'd like to take the twins to the park today. Mrs. Peters looked horrified. Miss Camden, that's not on the schedule. Mr. Croft doesn't allow the twins to leave the property without his explicit permission. Then I'll ask him, Rose said firmly. She called Harrison at his office. Mr. Croft, the twins need fresh air and new experiences. I want to take them to the park. Absolutely not, Harrison said immediately, his voice sharp. It's not safe. They could get sick. Someone could hurt them. There are too many variables I can't control. Mr. Croft, your sons are not fragile museum pieces. They're children who need to experience life. The answer is no, Miss Camden, that's final. Rose hung up the phone and stood in the nursery, looking at Leo and Theo sitting on their pristine playmat. They were making progress, yes, but Rose knew with every fiber of her being that they needed more. They needed to feel cool grass under their hands, hear birds singing above them, see other children laughing and playing. She made a decision that could, and very likely would, cost her her job. Rose dressed the twins in warm clothes, put them in their double stroller, and walked right out the front door. Rose pushed the double stroller through the gilded gates of a nearby park, her heart pounding with a mixture of exhilaration and pure fear. She had just directly disobeyed a command from her billionaire employer. She could be fired the moment she returned. But when she looked down at Leo and Theo, their eyes wide with wonder as they took in the towering trees, the vast blue sky, the symphony of birds and distant children's laughter, she knew she had made the right choice. Look, boys, Rose said softly, kneeling beside the stroller. See those leaves? They're turning orange and red because it's autumn. And listen, can you hear the birds singing? For the first time since Rose had met them, the twins looked truly, vibrantly alert, their heads turned in unison toward the sounds. Their eyes tracked the frantic, joyful movement of squirrels running up trees. Rose found a quiet spot on the grass, away from the crowds but where they could still see other children playing. She spread out a soft blanket and carefully lifted Leo and Theo from their stroller, setting them on the fabric. Then Rose did something she'd been wanting to do for weeks. She gently removed their shoes and socks, letting their bare feet connect with the earth. Theo's eyes went wide. He looked down at his feet, feeling the cool, damp blades of grass between his toes. Then he did something utterly amazing. He laughed. A real, genuine belly laugh that made Rose's eyes instantly fill with tears. Leo reached down and grabbed a handful of grass, bringing it close to his face to examine it, his expression one of intense, scientific curiosity. He was engaged, present, in a way Rose had never seen before. That's right, sweet boys, Rose murmured. The world is full of amazing things. You just needed someone to show you. For the next hour, Rose let the twins explore at their own pace. She didn't rush them or force them into any activity. She just stayed close, narrating their new experiences, encouraging their burgeoning curiosity. Then, something miraculous happened. A little girl, maybe 2 years old, toddled over to their blanket. She was holding a bright yellow dandelion and offered it to Theo with a shy smile. Theo stared at the girl for a long, contemplative moment. Then, slowly, he reached out his hand toward the flower, but the girl was just out of his reach. The flower hovered just beyond his fingertips. Rose held her breath, not wanting to interfere. Theo looked at the flower, then down at his own legs, then back at the flower. Rose could almost see the wheels turning in his little mind, a complex calculation of desire and physics. And then, impossibly, miraculously, Theo pushed himself up onto his knees. His legs shook with the effort, but he was supporting his own weight for the very first time in his life. "Theo!" Rose gasped, her voice a whisper of encouragement. "You're doing it, baby. You're so strong." Encouraged by her excitement, Theo pushed harder. He got one foot under himself, then the other. He was crouching now, his whole body trembling with intense effort. The little girl giggled and held the flower out a little further, as if she understood she was part of this momentous event. And then Theo stood up, actually stood on his own 2 feet, wobbling and shaking, but standing. He took one hesitant step, then another, then a third. He walked 3 whole steps before tumbling gently into Rose's waiting arms. Rose was crying and laughing at the same time. "Theo, you walked! You did it!" Leo, seeing his brother's incredible accomplishment, looked fiercely determined. He planted his small hands on the ground and pushed himself up. It took him longer, and his movements were shakier, but within minutes, Leo was standing too. The twins had been walking for less than 5 minutes when Rose heard the voice behind her that made her blood run cold. What in the hell is going on here? Harrison Croft stood at the edge of their blanket, his face a mask of thunderous fury, tinged with something that looked unnervingly like panic. "Mr. Croft?" Rose shot to her feet, instinctively positioning herself between him and the twins. "I can explain. You directly disobeyed my orders," Harrison said, his voice trembling with a tightly controlled rage. "You took my sons out of the house without permission. You put them in danger. You—" He stopped abruptly, his eyes locking onto Theo, who was actually standing on his own 2 feet, gripping Rose's leg for balance. Harrison's furious expression dissolved, replaced by a pale, slack-jawed shock. His voice was a choked whisper. "He's standing?" "Yes," Rose said quietly, her own voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her. "Both of them. They took their first steps about 10 minutes ago." Harrison stared at his sons as if he were seeing them for the very first time. Leo was now pulling himself up, using Rose's other leg, his face a mask of fierce concentration as he got his own feet under him. "How?" Harrison whispered, the single word encompassing a universe of disbelief and wonder. "They needed motivation," Rose explained gently. "They needed something they wanted badly enough to try. In the house, everything is brought to them. They have no reason to move. Out here, there's so much to see and explore that they finally had a reason." Harrison sank down onto the blanket, his legs seeming unable to support him any longer. He watched as Leo took 2 wobbly steps toward a fluttering butterfly before falling onto his bottom. But instead of crying, Leo laughed and immediately tried to get back up again. "I thought—" Harrison's voice cracked. "I thought keeping them safe meant keeping them inside, controlling everything, making sure nothing bad could happen to them." "Mr. Croft," Rose said, sitting down beside him. "Nothing bad happened to them today. Something wonderful happened. They discovered they could move. They could explore. They could be brave." Harrison put his face in his hands, his broad shoulders shaking. "I've been so afraid of losing them that I forgot they needed to live." Rose placed a gentle, steadying hand on Harrison's shoulder. "It's not too late. They're still so young. There's still so much time to be the father they need." Harrison looked up at Rose, his eyes red-rimmed and vulnerable. "I don't know how. I don't know how to be what they need. Then let me help you, Rose said simply. Let me show you. That evening, after the twins were bathed and sound asleep in their cribs, Harrison asked Rose to meet him in his study. Rose walked in, nervously, still half expecting to be fired for her blatant disobedience. But Harrison wasn't sitting behind his massive desk in his usual position of power. He was sitting in one of the plush armchairs by the fireplace, and he gestured for Rose to sit in the other. Miss Camden. Rose, Harrison began, his voice low. I owe you an apology. Several apologies, actually. Rose remained quiet, giving him the space to continue. I hired you to follow my instructions, and when you didn't, I was furious. But you were right to disobey me. You saw what my sons needed when I couldn't see it myself. Harrison leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. Can I tell you something I've never told anyone before? Of course. I blamed them, Harrison said, the words barely a whisper. The twins, for Sophia's death. I know that's monstrous. I know they're innocent. But every time I looked at them, all I could think was that she died giving them life, that they took her from me. Rose felt her heart ache for this broken, lonely man. Mr. Croft, Harrison, grief isn't logical. You can't control what you feel, but you can control what you do with those feelings. I know. And what I did was abandon my sons emotionally, all while convincing myself I was protecting them. I threw money at the problem instead of giving them what they actually needed, a parent who was present. Harrison looked at Rose with raw, unflinching honesty. Watching them today in the park, seeing them laugh and explore and take their first steps, I realized I've missed everything. All their progress, all their small, quiet victories. I've been so busy grieving Sophia that I forgot to celebrate the two pieces of her that are still here. It's not too late, Rose said again, her voice a gentle anchor. Leo and Theo are still so young. You can still be part of their lives in a truly meaningful way. Will you help me? Harrison asked, the question vulnerable and sincere. Not just as their nanny, but as, I don't know what to call it, a partner in raising them, someone who can teach me how to connect with them. Rose smiled, a warm, genuine smile that reached her eyes. I'd be honored. The next morning, Harrison made a decision he had been avoiding for 18 long months. He asked Rose to help him go through Sophia's belongings. Her bedroom had been locked since her death. Harrison couldn't bear to enter it, to see her clothes still hanging in the closet, her books on the nightstand, her perfume still lingering on the dresser. But he knew that if he was going to truly move forward, he needed to stop running from the past. Rose stood beside him as he unlocked the door. The room was exactly as Sophia had left it, a perfect sunlit space frozen in time. She was so excited about the twins, Harrison said softly, running his hand over the empty crib that had been set up in the corner. She had already picked out their names, decorated the nursery, read every single parenting book she could find. She was going to be an amazing mother. Rose noticed a large, ornate wooden box on Sophia's desk. What's in there? Harrison opened it carefully. Inside were dozens of carefully preserved items. Recipes written in Sophia's elegant handwriting, a leather-bound journal, stacks of photographs, and a small handmade book of songs. She was making this for the twins, Harrison said, his voice thick with unshed tears. A box of memories and traditions from her family. She wanted them to know where they came from, even if... His voice trailed off. Rose picked up the book of songs. They were lullabies, each one carefully written out with little notes about when Sophia's own mother had sung them to her as a child. Harrison, this is beautiful. The twins should have this. They should know their mother through her words, her recipes, her songs. Harrison nodded, tears finally streaming down his face. I've been so focused on my own grief that I forgot Leo and Theo lost her too. They'll never know how much she loved them, how excited she was to meet them. Then we'll show them, Rose said firmly. "We'll cook her recipes with them. We'll sing her songs to them every night. We'll read them her journal entries about how she imagined their future. We'll make sure they know Sophia not as a tragedy, but as their mother, who loved them fiercely before she ever even met them." That afternoon, Rose and Harrison sat on the floor of the nursery with Leo and Theo. Between them was Sophia's memory box. "Boys," Harrison said, his voice shaking slightly, "I want to tell you about your mama, your first mama who loved you so, so much." Rose opened the handmade lullaby book and began to sing one of Sophia's songs. It was a gentle, haunting melody about stars and dreams, and a love that lasts forever. As Rose sang, something extraordinary happened. The twins, who had only just started making random sounds, began to hum along, not with words, but with little melodic coos that perfectly matched the tune. Harrison watched in utter amazement. How are they doing that? "Music is one of the first things babies recognize," Rose explained softly. "Some researchers believe that babies can hear and remember songs from when they were in the womb." Harrison's eyes widened. You think they remember Sophia singing to them?" "Maybe," Rose said. "Or maybe they just recognize something that feels like love." Harrison reached out tentatively and picked up Leo, holding his son close for the first time in months without flinching. Leo looked up at his father with curious, intelligent eyes, then reached up with a tiny hand and touched Harrison's face. "Hi, buddy," Harrison whispered. "I'm your daddy, and I'm so sorry it took me so long to really see you." Theo crawled over and pulled himself up using Harrison's knee. Harrison laughed through his tears and picked up Theo too, holding both his sons for the first time since they had come home from the hospital. Rose watched this moment of profound healing, with silent tears streaming down her own face. This was what she had been working toward all along, not just getting the twins to walk and talk, but helping this broken, grieving family find its way back to each other. Over the next few weeks, everything changed in the Croft household. Harrison rearranged his entire work schedule to spend mornings and evenings with the twins. He sat on the floor with them, played with them, and read to them. He learned how to change diapers, how to make bottles, how to soothe them when they cried. Most importantly, he started to heal. Rose taught him how to truly engage with Leo and Theo, showing him games that encouraged their development, songs that made them laugh, and ways to communicate that built trust and deep connection. They worked together as a team, co-parenting the twins in a way that felt natural and right. There was no romance between them. Their age difference and professional relationship made that inappropriate. But they developed a deep, powerful friendship based on their shared, unconditional love for the boys. One evening, about 3 months after the day at the park, Harrison was sitting on the floor, building a tower of blocks with Leo, while Rose helped Theo practice walking across the room. Harrison stacked the blocks carefully, making the tower as tall as he could. "Ready, Leo? Watch Daddy knock it down." Harrison pushed the tower over, and the blocks scattered everywhere. Leo shrieked with delight and clapped his hands. Then, clear as a bell, he said his second word. "Dada." Harrison froze. "Did he just—" "Dada, dada," Leo repeated, pointing at Harrison with a huge, shavel smile. Theo, not wanting to be left out, toddled over to Harrison and grabbed his sleeve. "Dada!" he echoed. Harrison pulled both boys into his arms, sobbing with pure, unadulterated joy. Yes, I'm your Dada. I'm here, boys. I'm finally here." Rose watched from across the room, her heart full to bursting. This was what success looked like. Not just twins who could walk and talk, but a father who had found his way back to life and love. 2 weeks later, Harrison's sister, Claire, came to visit. She lived in Boston and hadn't seen Harrison or the twins since Sophia's funeral. Claire was shocked by the transformation in her brother. He looked healthier, happier, more alive than he had in years, and the twins were running around, chattering and laughing, completely different from the silent, still babies she remembered. But Claire was troubled by one thing. Rose's role in the family. "Harrison, can we talk privately?" Claire asked after dinner. In his study, she got straight to the point. "I'm concerned about your relationship with the nanny." "Rose, what about her?" "She seems very involved. The twins call her Mama. You two work together like partners. I'm just worried about boundaries." Harrison immediately felt defensive. "Rose saved my sons, Claire. Not literally, but emotionally. She gave them what I couldn't." "I understand that, but Harrison, she's an employee. The twins calling her Mama seems inappropriate. What happens when she moves on to another job? The boys will be devastated." Harrison hadn't allowed himself to think about that. The idea of Rose leaving made his chest tighten with a familiar, cold anxiety. Not because of romantic feelings, but because she had become an essential, irreplaceable part of their family. "I can't think about that right now," Harrison admitted. "Rose is here now, and she's helping us heal." "Harrison," Claire said gently, "I think you need to make a decision. Either Rose is an employee, in which case you need to establish clear, professional boundaries, or she's family, in which case you need to acknowledge that and treat her accordingly. You can't have it both ways." Harrison knew his sister was right. That night he asked Rose for another conversation in his study. "Rose," he began, "my sister pointed out that your role has evolved far beyond a typical nanny. The twins call you Mama. We make parenting decisions together. You're not just their caregiver, you're a central part of their lives. But we've never talked about whether that's sustainable long-term." Rose was quiet for a moment, choosing her words carefully. "Harrison, I love Leo and Theo as if they were my own. When they call me Mama, it makes my heart full, but I also know they're not my children. They're yours. But they need you," Harrison said, his voice earnest. "I need you. Not romantically," he added quickly, "but as a co-parent, as a partner in raising them. I can't imagine doing this without you." "Then what are you asking?" "I'm asking if you would consider staying permanently. Not as an employee, but as, I don't know what to call it, a guardian, a second parent. We could draw up legal agreements that give you parental rights, make sure you are always a part of their lives." Rose felt tears spring to her eyes. "You would do that? Rose, you've given me my life back. You helped my sons become the happy, healthy children they were always meant to be. I trust you completely. The question is this what you want? Do you want to be tied to this family permanently?" "Yes," Rose said simply, the single word holding the weight of her entire heart. "Yes, I want to be a part of this family. Not because of money or security, but because I love those boys, and I want to be there for every milestone, every challenge, every moment of their lives." Harrison smiled with profound relief. "Then let's make it official." Over the next few months, Rose's role in the family was formally recognized. She moved from the staff quarters to a suite near the nursery. She had an equal say in all decisions regarding the twins' care, their education, and their future. She became, in every way that mattered, their second parent. The twins thrived under the care of two devoted parents who loved them, who worked together to meet their every need, who showed them through their actions what family truly meant. On the twins' second birthday, Harrison and Rose threw them a party in the garden. It was a small gathering, just family and a few close friends, but it was filled with love and laughter. As Harrison watched Leo and Theo run around, playing with other children, he marveled at how far they had all come. Rose came to stand beside him, holding 2 pieces of birthday cake. "Can you believe how much they've grown?" she asked, her eyes shining. "Because of you," Harrison said. "You saved us, Rose. All 3 of us." Rose shook her head. "We saved each other. You gave me a family when I didn't have one. The twins gave me a purpose. And together, we all learned how to heal." Harrison raised his glass of iced tea. "To chosen family, to second chances, and to finding love in the most unexpected places." Rose clinked her glass against his. "To the journey ahead." As the sun set over the garden and the twins blew out their candles surrounded by people who loved them, Harrison thought about everything that had changed. His sons had learned to walk and talk, but more importantly, they had learned to trust, to love, and to be brave. And Harrison had learned the most important lesson of all, that healing doesn't come from control or protection, but from connection, from letting people in, from being vulnerable enough to accept help from the one person you never expected could save your life. The twins now had two mothers, Sophia, whom they knew through stories and songs, and Rose, whom they knew through daily, unwavering love. And Harrison had learned that honoring Sophia's memory didn't mean he couldn't embrace the beautiful new family they had built in her wake. Sometimes, the people who save us aren't the ones we expect. And sometimes, family isn't about blood. It's about who shows up, who stays, and who loves us through the very worst of times.